Hello, my name is Erin Meyer. I'm the Sustainable Food Programs Coordinator at the University of California, Merced. I'm going to talk to you about Project Drawdown, reducing food waste and implementing plant-rich diets to fight climate change. So just a brief overview. What is Project Drawdown and the Drawdown Review, and what are the findings? We're going to talk about food waste and also plant-rich diets. Project Drawdown is a book. It describes the 100 most substantive solutions to global warming. For each solution, we describe its history, the carbon impact it provides, the relative cost and savings, the path to adoption, and how it works. The goal of the research that informs Drawdown is to determine if we can reverse the buildup of atmospheric carbon within 30 years. All solutions modeled are already in place, well understood, analyzed based on peer-reviewed science, and are expanding around the world. So this was Project Drawdown, and then they did the Drawdown Review, looked at new data, and rearranged the solutions to find that the 5 top solutions for Drawdown are reduced food waste, health and education, plant-rich diets, refrigerant management, and then tropical forest restoration. So roughly a third of the world's food is never eaten, which means land and resources used and greenhouse gases emitted in producing it were unnecessary. Interventions can reduce loss and waste as food moves from farm to fork, thereby reducing overall demand. Specifically, interventions could reduce more than 87 gigatons of CO2 over the next few decades. So there's a difference between food loss and food waste. Specifically, food loss refers to food that spills, spoils, incurs an abnormal reduction in quality such as bruising or wilting, or otherwise gets lost before it reaches the consumer. This is typically at the production, storage, processing, and distribution stage, and it's usually the result of agricultural processes or technical limitations in storage, infrastructure, packaging, and/or marketing. This is in contrast to food waste, which refers to food that is of good quality and fit for consumption, but does not get consumed because it is discarded either before or after it is left to spoil. This is typically at the retail and consumption stages, and it's usually the result of negligence or a conscious decision to throw food away. So food loss tends to occur more so in developing countries, and food waste tends to occur more in developed countries. So food waste is a huge problem. Globally, 40% of food is wasted. That equates to 400 pounds of food per person per year in America. It's an economic issue. It costs $218 billion every year. It contributes to 2.6% of all greenhouse gas emissions, contributing to climate change. It takes up 21% of our landfills. It uses 21% of agricultural water. It uses 300 billion barrels of oil. It uses land, fertilizer, labor, energy, and all the other resources that go into it. It's also a social issue, considering that 1 in 8 Americans are food insecure, which means they don't have reliable access to nutritious food. By reducing losses by just 15%, valuable nutrients in this food could feed 25 million more Americans. So by throwing away just half of the hamburger, it's about the same as taking a 60-minute shower in terms of water usage. So this is such a big deal that the UN created a sustainable development goal around it, and that is goal number 12.3, which calls on all nations to halve their food waste and reduce food loss by 2030. It recommends that nations, cities, and businesses in the food supply chain move quickly to set reduction targets, measure progress, and take action to reduce food loss and food waste. There are a variety of causes of loss and waste. In developed countries, it occurs mostly at the retail and consumer level, and this is due to retailers rejecting imperfect foods, consumers over-preparing or over-serving, and also the confusion over date labels. That is a huge cause. In developing countries, this mostly happens on the farm and in transport, and this is due to challenges with heat, humidity, bad roads, a lack of refrigeration, and so on. In terms of solutions, the EPA created a food waste hierarchy. The very best way to reduce food waste and food loss is just to prevent it in the first place, so source reduction. The next best would be to feed hungry people, so donate that extra food to food banks, soup kitchens, shelters, pantries, followed by feeding animals, and then industrial uses, and then composting. And the very last thing we should be doing is landfilling the food. Because when food goes to landfill, it contributes to climate change. So say you have an apple, it goes to the landfill, a mattress or some other sort of trash covers it up, there's no oxygen there. And that means it undergoes anaerobic digestion, which creates methane as a byproduct, and methane is a very potent greenhouse gas, so it contributes to climate change. There are also a variety of solutions for you and other consumers. You can ask for a doggy bag when eating at restaurants and then eating the actual leftovers instead of just having them get pushed in the back of your fridge like they tend to do. Storing and freezing all food properly. Using all the food from your garden or your backyard fruit tree and then donating any that you can't eat. Composting food scraps, which I know composting isn't a great option, but inevitably there might be some food scraps, and if you could compost that, that's better than landfill. Learning about expiration dates, that would go a long way in this problem. So briefly, best if used by or before refers to when a product will be of best flavor or quality. It's not a purchase or safety date. Sell by tells the store how long to display the product for sale. It's for the purposes of inventory, and again, it's not a safety date. Use by is the last date recommended for the use of the product while at its best quality. So it's not a safety date, except for infant formula, so keep that in mind. Another solution, reducing impulse and bulk purchases, reducing portion size, cooking just enough, buying imperfect produce, cooking root to stem, go gleaning, use other apps and other technology to help you. There are some legislative solutions also, one of which would be the Food Recovery Act, which calls for research into new tech and approaches for prevention. It calls for better date labeling, which would standardize and differentiate safety dates from quality dates. It would employ a government liaison to coordinate all of this across federal agencies, and it would also support composting. Another very important piece of legislation is the Bill Emerson Good Samaritan Food Donation Act. And this provides liability protection to food donors. So any business, group, individual, anyone that donates food in good faith to a nonprofit cannot be sued. They have liability protection. So this legislation is very important. There are many local solutions to food waste and food insecurity and food loss, one of which is CropMobster. So it is a website kind of like the Craigslist of food, nutrition, and agriculture. You just go to cropmobster.com, create a free account, and you can find a variety of alerts, like sale alerts, job alerts, free alerts, and a variety of other things. We also have the Bobcat Eats Food Waste Awareness and Prevention Program in the county, and this is a food rescue program that picks up surplus food and brings it to those in need, like local food pantries. We also have No Food Left Behind, which is a University of California Merced program that connects students, staff, and faculty with food resources. It was initially created to address food waste happening at events, but because of COVID, we don't have any events currently, so we're using the tech service to connect our community with other resources like CalFresh and other distribution sites. Then we have the Pop-Up People's Pantry. This is a free food distribution every Saturday at the 18th Street People's Garden. We just give out free food that we pick up from our farmers market, as well as get from donations from community members. We will soon be opening the People's Fridge, which is a community fridge where people can take food that they might need and they can leave what they don't. So now transitioning into animal agriculture. Animal ag is the second largest contributor to human-made greenhouse gases. Specifically, it accounts for 5% of CO2 emissions, 44% of methane emissions, 44% of nitrous oxide emissions, and 75 to 80% of total ag emissions. Cattle is particularly problematic. They are by far the biggest source of emissions. Most of these emissions result from the methane released from enteric fermentation, a loss of carbon stored in forests and soils from land use, change, and degradation, and also the fossil fuels that are burned to produce the mineral fertilizers for feed production. There are also other impacts, such as air and water pollution, deforestation, biodiversity loss, pesticide discharge into waters, antibiotics, antibiotic resistance. Animal ag is also linked to 55% of erosion, 60% of nitrogen pollution, and 70% of the global dietary phosphorus footprint. So plant-rich diets is a good solution to this. If global consumption of meat and dairy continues to grow at the current pace, the ag sector could consume 70% of the allowable budget of all greenhouse gas emissions by mid-century. So basically, in order to reduce our goal of limiting warming to 2 degrees C, we need to reduce emissions from 49 gigatons to 23 gigatons by 2050. And agriculture would use up to 20 of those gigatons, leaving only 3 for the global economy. So greenhouse gas intensity from the average Western diet could be cut in half by adopting a plant-based diet. So in sum, in order to help the climate, we can reduce our food waste and also opt for a plant-rich diet. Thank you.